In fact, Dallas City Hall is normally a public building, but today it was really under armed guard.
Jack Ruby, the carousel shot.
Is this a confirmed report as to who did the shooting?
As far as I know, I just got it from Vic Robertson.
Vic Robertson from City Hall reports that Jack Ruby, the owner of the Carousel, which is a bar in Dallas, did the shooting.
The only thing that is clear at this point is that there is not a single police officer in this building who believes that Jack Ruby killed Lee Oswald, if that is proven to be the case, out of patriotic fervor. And that if he is proved to have killed Lee Oswald, it was for one reason only, and that was to seal his lips.
Jack Ruby was no national hero who was just pained by how the death of JFK would have hurt Jacqueline Kennedy, which was his story. I mean, that's preposterous on its face.
In the 1970s, G. Robert Blakey was chief counsel to the congressional committee that investigated the assassinations of both JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. Some of those closest to the investigation insist that uncovering Ruby's role is the key to unraveling the entire plot.
With many believing that in order to silence Lee Harvey Oswald, conspirators sent in a hitman named Jack Ruby. This man, apparently waiting for Oswald along with reporters, is Jack Ruby. Why was Ruby there? What was on his mind? Revenge? Or was Jack Ruby a cold-blooded actor in a conspiracy?
The big question now is, what kind of man shot Lee Oswald, and why?
When you have a fellow who 2 days after the assassination of the president shoots the man who's accused of killing the president, and he has mob connections, then you've got to assume there's a conspiracy from the get-go.
The true story of the man who shot Oswald begins not in Dallas, but Chicago, where Jack Ruby was born Jacob Rubenstein.
Ruby, in his early years, began as a runner for members of the mob in Chicago, carrying envelopes that had money from the numbers racket from one place to another.
Author David Shimes spent 15 years researching his book, Contract on America, which documents the links between Jack Ruby and the Mafia.
As a young teenager, Ruby was with a gang of youths that ran errands for Al Capone. His most significant organized crime connection as a youth was as an official in a mob-controlled union.
In 1937, Ruby gets a job as an organizer for the corrupt Scrap Iron and Junk Handlers Union. Ruby's contacts have direct connections to powerful New Orleans mob boss Carlos Marcello. In fact, Marcello's organization oversees all the mob rackets in Dallas, and Ruby knows his way around the Dallas mob.
Ruby was a frequent visitor and associate of Joseph Civillo, the mafia boss of Dallas.
Keep in mind that in those days, if you had a nightclub in any major city, it was almost unavoidable to have contact with certain elements which controlled entertainment, booze distribution, and so forth.
As owner of the Carousel, Jack was well known in certain circles around Dallas, especially in the Dallas Police Department. Jack idolized cops and encouraged members of the Dallas PD and Sheriff's Office to come to the Carousel. Jack's club also appealed to other not-so-reputable characters looking for a good time, including members of organized crime. To Ruby, both cops and mobsters had class, something Jack craved but never had. Jack had gained a reputation around Dallas as a wannabe. Jack was also something of a fighter. He had a quick temper and even quicker fists, earning him the nickname Sparky among his friends. On over a dozen occasions during the 3 years the Carousel was open, Jack publicly beat customers bloody with his fists, brass knuckles, or the butt of his Colt .38. Ruby beat one of his musicians so badly, the man had to bite off the tip of Jack's finger to get Jack away from him.
To say that he had no connections to organized crime, it's just bizarre. The women that he had in the strip club in Dallas were on a circuit that included the Show Bar in New Orleans, bar owned by Carlos Marcello's brother.
The mob felt that the Kennedys had double-crossed them on a deal in the 1960 presidential election. That Joe Kennedy had come to some of the mob big shots and said, please support Jack for president. As soon as Kennedy was elected, one of his first appointments was Bobby Kennedy as Attorney General, and the first thing that Bobby Kennedy did was go after organized crime.
In Bobby Kennedy's sights are Sam Giancana, godfather of the Chicago outfit. Johnny Roselli is Giancana's man in Vegas and Hollywood. The boss in Tampa, Florida, Santo Trafficante Jr., maintains strong ties in Cuba and a close partnership with Louisiana kingpin Carlos Marcello. In 1961, unable to indict Marcello, Bobby Kennedy pressures immigration authorities to deport him to Guatemala, the country Marcello falsely claimed as his birthplace.
They put him in handcuffs, put him on an airplane. And Carlos Marcello was a man with a great deal of dignity. And the notion that somebody else would put their hands on him is an insult, a major insult.
Kennedy had federal agents kidnap Marcello when Marcello went to report to the Immigration and Naturalization Service and office in New Orleans. They took him and put him on a plane and dropped him off in Guatemala.
And Marcello was livid. This was America's most powerful godfather. All the time he's cursing Bobby Kennedy, whom he blames for everything.
It takes weeks, but according to the Border Patrol, Carlos Marcello gets his close associate and pilot, David Ferry, to sneak him back into the U.S.
Unknown to JFK, the CIA was continuing to work with Trafficante, Roselli, and Sam Giancana in a secret plot to kill Fidel Castro. Carlos Marcello very colorfully explained that if you have a dog and you cut off its tail, meaning Bobby Kennedy, the head of the dog, meaning JFK, will turn around and bite you. But if you cut off the head of the dog, meaning kill JFK, then the tail quits wagging on its own. So the Mafia developed their plan to kill JFK, and the first attempt was not in Dallas, but it was actually planned for Chicago.
Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden was one of 13 agents in Chicago preparing for the president's visit on November 2nd, 1963.
About the end of October, we began hearing rumors of an assassination squad that followed him from Miami, as we understood.
A day before the president is due in Chicago, the Miami intercepts take on sudden urgency.
A lady called the U.S. Secret Service office. She said that she was a landlady in a building where there were 2 Cubans were staying, and she went in to do something in the apartment, and she saw 4 rifles in the room. Also in the room there was a newspaper, and she thought it was turned to the route that President Kennedy was supposed to take.
The Secret Service puts the group under surveillance.
During the process of keeping them under surveillance, one of the agents got too close to one of the suspects. In fact, that the suspect heard his radio go off, and right away they began to pack up and they fled.
2 hours before JFK's planned motorcade, Chicago police stop Thomas Arthur Valley. In the trunk of his car, they find an M1 rifle and 3,000 rounds of ammunition. Even more troubling, agents learn that Valley works in a printing company that overlooks the president's motorcade route.
Valley had several interesting parallels to Lee Harvey Oswald. He was an ex-Marine like Oswald. Both Valley and Oswald at the same time got jobs along the projected motorcade route for JFK.
At 9:15 a.m., as eager bystanders line the president's motorcade route, JFK's press secretary abruptly announces the cancellation of the president's trip.
The Mafia didn't have 3 different plans to kill JFK. They had one plan and tried it in 3 different cities. The second city where they tried was 4 days before Dallas and Tampa, Florida.
One of the masterminds behind the plot, Carlos Marcello, though 500 miles away on trial in a New Orleans courthouse, has things under control in Dallas.